Welcome to Future Ready Live, where we talk about topics that will help CPAs, CGMAs, and their organizations prepare to adapt and thrive in an exponentially changing world. I'm your host, Tom Hood, EVP of Business Engagement and Growth at the AICPA-CIMA, the largest global body of professional certified accountants in the world. Today, we're going to be talking about insights from the third Future of Finance Summit and how one CAO and his key leaders used that experience to transform his finance organization. Joining me is Ron Fader. He's the Senior Vice President for Finance and Accounting at the Atrium Hospitality Group. He started as a CPA with Coopers and Lybrand, now PwC, then moved into the hospitality industry, where his experience led to significant growth as a finance professional for over 30 years. He's leading efforts to transform the finance function at Atrium into a key value creator and revenue generator for the business. And then with me, Barry Payne on our team at AICPA and CIMA. He's the Director of External Relations for America's region for the AICPA-CIMA. He co-leads our Future Finance Initiative, and I often fondly refer to him as my wingman. Ron and Barry, say hello to our audience.
Hello.
And hello, Ron and Tom.
Well, it's great to have you both here. And I'm going to start, Barry, with you. Just tell us the story of how you know Ron and how you got him to be part of our Future Finance Leadership Advisory Group, and then we'll take it on from there.
Well, prior to the pandemic, Atlanta was one of my favorite destinations. So many great businesses, Ron, down your neck of the woods. And I'd regularly go on a tour of the 75 and 85 and up towards North Atlanta. And I'd always pop into the Intercontinental Hotels Group. And there I met a lovely guy, great leader called Chris Dunn. And then obviously, lockdown happened and I couldn't travel. And as I started to get to know you, Tom, and by the way, happy third anniversary to your good self, sir. And as we were thinking about getting better connected with the corporate finance and accounting audience, I decided to give Chris a call. Lo and behold, Chris had changed roles, and he told me that no longer was he working for the IHG group, but instead working for a really cool hospitality organization called Atrium. And we had a wonderful conversation, great guy, about opportunities to, serve better your customers at Atrium and evolve your finance function. But he said to me, you got to meet this guy called Ron Fader. And I said, brilliant. You put us in touch. And quite frankly, Ron, the rest is history. I think if there's a story to bring to our audience about the power of working together in partnership and how we've been able to, I suppose, leverage together our Future of Finance initiative, it's this story coming up. So, via Chris to Ron, and I've enjoyed every step of the way.
All right. Well, so Ron, tell us a little bit about your experience as you came into our Future Finance Group, and certainly were a big participant at our summit this past December, and then how we got to your Hotel Controllers Conference.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to unpack, and Barry, you're right. I guess the rest is history. I was coming out of a much smaller organization for the last 9-10 years before I joined Atrium. And at a much smaller organization, I really didn't have as much of a need to lean on the AICPA-CIMA. And when I joined, and I say joined, I rejoined Chris. He and I used to work together at IHG years back. I was sort of reaching out for colleagues in other industries or even in the same industry because Atrium was a much larger organization and really needed to understand what were the opportunities and the resources out there to help grow a finance and accounting organization. Chris had the conversation with you, Barry, and next thing I know, I was on a virtual summit. I think it was the middle of 2022. It was a very large Teams call, like many had become accustomed to. And before I knew it, what I had visions to achieve for Atrium here in the finance and accounting group, and what Chris and our executive team wanted was what the AICPA had been kind of touting as a future of finance. So your train had already left the station, but apparently there were other trains to get on. So I got on the next train that I could, and had the great opportunity to meet you gentlemen and your teams in Austin for your second Future of Finance Summit. And we internally were looking at doing some transformative things, but never really packaged it like a transformation. But the more we kept in touch, and the more whether it was the virtual summit or the in-face summit occurred, it became apparent to me that what we were trying to achieve was none too different than hundreds of other finance and accounting organizations across, frankly, the globe. So I just sat back and took in what you and again, all these other company leaders were talking about, and realized we weren't alone. And this would be a great journey, and we would be much more informed as we began to lean into our transformation. To roll quickly forward, Tom, you asked, how did you land at our controllers conference? So after, about a year and a half of working together and really packaging and messaging the need for an Atrium finance transformation, we started to realize the need to pull our directors of accounting, controllers, all of our field-based and corporate-based teams together to host a conference. We hadn't had one in well over 5 years. And again, in the conversations with y'all, it just became apparent that sometimes internal messaging isn't as strong as external messaging. So really, again, just decided to invite y'all, and you put on what was kind of a keystone 3-hour workshop to really immerse our team and all of ourselves into the idea of what's it going to feel like to do a transformation, and more importantly, where do we want to go? And Tom, you provided some output after that session, which again will become our roadmap for the future. But that's kind of a 2.5 year history, in a nutshell, and I'm sure we'll dive into elements of it here as we go.
Well, yeah. So Barry, go ahead. Why don't you add into this, because I think the big session that we've learned that really can help a finance team. So Ron, you hit it nail on the head. What we've observed over probably 100 of these working sessions with companies all over the place is that we're all walking the same journey. To your point, like you said, the trains might be leaving at different times, but we're all walking that same journey.
Yeah.
And then Barry, talk a little bit about riding the waves of transformation, because I think that's what we've really started to learn about in terms of providing that outside-in view to a finance team.
Yeah, and it's something that, Ron, you very much connected with. And I think for the audience, I don't want you to think that you need to be an expert surfer. It's basically just a storyline. But it's an important one, and I think the way that we tell it is that it's like working for a business. You're constantly trying to navigate or take the waves one step at a time, and avoid getting caught underwater. So an analogy for looking at how you can create business transformation and a better way of working. There's nothing better than riding the waves of transformation. And I think what's really cool, and Ron, you can comment in a second as to what happened in Buckhead for you. But the great thing about riding the waves of transformation, it's really setting the scene for change in a very open way. Because you can imagine that as a finance or as an accounting professional, there is so much that's hitting us right now from all different parts of business and life. I mean, the obvious new one, of course, we could spend a completely new LinkedIn Live on this, is obviously generative AI and things. And I think what warmed me to your story, Ron, is the way that you're set up. You've got controllers of basically small independent concerns. As in a hotel, they might not have the kind of the luxury of working for a large corporate organization or what have you. So that brings in a different dynamics to things. And the idea behind Waves is really to provide that outside in feel for what our Future of Finance group is kind of thinking right now and setting that scene. Some great exercises that Tom took you guys through over there in your conference. And it's really about, I think, having people feel like they own and can be part of the change. And I love the polling that we do, Ron, because I think that's a game changer.
Yeah. We've tried to adopt that as well. Our first functional meeting right after the conference, it just seemed like, we needed a poll again to just gauge people's thoughts. I think, Tom, you referred to it as a kind of a sentiment analysis, which if you're new to ChatGPT, which I am, asking for a sentiment analysis based on data is probably one of the more progressive but yet easy things to accomplish. So again, your recommendation to just keep asking questions, keep asking how do people feel. Again, it's a great journey so far, but it's a long journey.
Well, and I remember when we took the insights from that presentation, your group was very engaged throughout all of that. But I remember that the insights, when you run that through ChatGPT, it actually tells you that your group was very, very ready. And you had done some pre-work, obviously, with the group, but they were ready for transformation and certainly willing to look at it, which is a critical element of success. Like our research we talk about is 39% of a finance transformation is about the mindset of your people.
Yeah.
And then the second 26% roughly is skill sets. And I think that showed up also in some of the polling there. So yeah, bring us forward in terms of like where you are now and how you're feeling about your transformation.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, and to understand where we are, a little bit of backdrop. When I arrived, I was kind of preaching the idea of scalability for our organization, and I think that while a lot of people embraced that, just talking about scalability wasn't specific enough. It needed a bit more clarity. And as I shared with y'all, the idea of people, processes, and technology, that's kind of become our kind of tagline. It's actually something that Chris brought with him from IHG, and he speaks of, if there's a technological solution for something, then that should be easier. The moment you start to deal with processes, you potentially are messing around with processes that someone has designed or someone has deployed. It gets a little bit more personal. And then when you start dealing with the people aspect, which, y'all are good to remind me that transformations, 80% of a transformation is the people side. But when you start messing with people's jobs, the org structure, it is the most sensitive and the most personal of anything you can do. So as we morphed our messaging away from scalability to more specific, we were also very, very thoughtful about what we were doing with regards to the technology side versus the processes and the people. And when we went into that conference, we really showed all of our cards and said, we're here for you. We're here for you as the controllers and the directors of accounting. We're here for you, corporate team. We're investing in bringing people together, helping the internal relationships get cultivated, the training component, and really just involving in the future of what we want to do as an organization. So with that, coupled with the open mindset, we are continuing to message. I spoke to y'all recently about our videos from the conference are now available, which, again, you've got to rinse and repeat. I mean, it doesn't make a difference how many times you message things. It's always important to keep messaging. So we'll reissue some of those so that people get a refresher, and those that couldn't attend have the opportunity to attend virtually. And then we're going to have to go after things piece by piece. Now, we do have some technological transformation going on, some digital transformation going on. Another outcome was this idea of the T-shaped professional, which I think has really been the linchpin for us. We came out of the conference looking forward to our conversation with you after the meeting. What next? And you had a plan for us, and the plan was take the vision of a T-shaped professional and link to it specially curated classes and training options, so that an individual who needs digital skill building or people skill building or business skill building, they could connect, in our case, to our Workday LMS platform, or to some curated topics and sessions that the AICPA has, or what have you. So, what we see ultimately is the creation of T-shaped professionals, which is the people element. I sound like a billboard for you. I know that, but it's so obvious. You create the people and the vision of the T-shaped professional, and then you get the good innovative ideas for technology. You get better processes, and again, you've rounded out the T, if you will. So that's really kind of where we stand, is beginning to assemble that curated content, so we could again develop and cultivate T-shaped professionals.
It was a ball, though, when you guys were telling me how you were all running around with your arms out doing the T-shape.
We were, and if I send you the videos, you will get to see some of that.
As a wingman, I like that kind of thing. Yeah.
So you're an exemplar of how to drive a transformation the way you should do it, involving your people, creating a vision, dealing with mindset, skill set, all those pieces we've learned. And we'll put a link to that document that we use for that research in this chat channel. Final thoughts, Barry, any concluding thoughts from you as you've known Ron longer than I have, but both of us have known him now for a few years, involved with our future of finance. Thoughts from you on what Ron's up to, and then I'll let Ron, you give any advice to the audience that's out there listening to us.
No, it's just tremendously rewarding knowing folks like you, Ron, who have the open-mindedness to think about change, and you're so people centric. And I think where we can add the most value is with that outside in perspective. And the word of advice I have for the audience is, if you're curious about the T, just direct message us. And we can share more about that, because I think it's a really good call to arms and a good call to action for people. It's very, very tangible, Ron. So that would be what I would like to say.
Okay, Ron, any concluding wisdom from you to the group out there?
It's a great question. Two things kind of catch me. Barry, you talked about being curious, but being curious is really just a mantra of mine, and it has been forever. Had I not been curious, I might have discarded the opportunity to join the virtual summit, and where might I be at this point? So, just by being curious and having a conversation, look where it led. But, I think that if I were to share something with the audience, in our industry, hospitality, we really took it on the chin through COVID. And those that survived, whether it's companies or individuals, were those that were really multifaceted, or I call it bilingual or even trilingual. They could do multiple jobs. So those were the individuals that could, at 10 and 20% occupancy levels, we weren't necessarily checking in customers all the time. So maybe they had to do something else. We learned how to train them to do things. I bring that up because, my background is somewhat similar. I mean, I grew up professionally as a CPA in the early days of databases and FP&A type work. And, I could have just stuck to the debits and the credits, but I really took a liking to the technology and have used it in kind of, again, as another language to improve month-end reporting, improve analytics, just improve the decision-making. So it's easy for me to step on stage and talk about being a T-shaped professional, because again, I was curious, and I learned a couple of other languages along the way. So I guess my advice would be to anyone pursuing the CPA, whether it's a CGMA candidate or what have you, don't just stick to your job description. Think outside your swim lane and and learn something else, whether it's, know your business operations as good or better than your business stakeholders, and or learn some technology or learn another function, because you never know when it's going to come in handy.
Perfect advice. What a way to wrap up this conversation, Ron. I want to thank you. And Barry, for my audience out there, you can follow Ron on LinkedIn at Ron Fader at the Atrium Hospitality Group, and Barry Payne on LinkedIn. Barry Payne, he's obviously at AICPA-CIMA. And thank you all in our audience for joining us live. And don't miss other Future Ready Live sessions back here on LinkedIn the first and third Tuesday of each month at noon Eastern. We'll see you then. And thanks again, Ron and Barry.
Thank you.
Thanks.